Did you know Montel uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to forecast spot prices, inflow to reservoirs, wind and run-of-river production? We can improve forecast for your individual power plants anywhere in Europe. Contact us at ai@montelnews.com for more info.
Hello listeners and welcome to the Montel Weekly Podcast. Bring you energy matters in an informal setting. This week we turn closer to home and look at the Nordic region and developments in wholesale electricity. As we recently said in a pod on the gas market, what a difference a year makes. In May 2020, spot prices struggled to get into double figures, while this month they were settled on some days close to €65 and have averaged around 42 so far this year. What's happened? Meanwhile, forward power prices in Germany are currently around €30 more expensive than those in the Nordic region. What are the reasons for this? Is it very strong carbon prices, Germany's reliance on coal and gas-fired power, or is low liquidity in the Nordics having an impact too? This week has seen the high-level inauguration of the NordLink interconnector linking southern Norway with Germany. Has this increased prices in Norway, particularly in southern areas, and lowered those in Germany? Or is the situation more complex than that? Joining me, Richard Sverrisson, to discuss these issues and much more are several eminent experts who will share their expertise on the Nordic power market and will give the pod a bit of a southern Norwegian flavour. Hello and welcome back to Reier, Lilleholt of Volue, formerly Whatsites. How are you doing, Tor Reier?
I'm fine, thank you. And I think it's exciting to be an analyst in this market. You showed here in 1 year, it's moving a lot and it's changing in all types of markets, not only the hydro. It's a lot of different things are happening here.
Absolutely. So hello, Sigbjorn Seland of StormGeo. Good to have you back on the pod. I hope you're well.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Excellent. And finally, Eylert Ellefsen of EQ. A pleasure to welcome you too, Eylert. All well with you, I hope?
Yes, so for me, it's in fact a couple of years, some years ago since I last focused so much on the Nordic market. I've been mainly for the European market for some while, but now it's interesting to be back studying more details in the Nordic market, and I see there are more factors being important now than for a period ago.
Excellent. Well, I hope we'll have plenty to talk about. So, But before we start, I think you guys know each other, don't you?
Yeah, we're actually from the same hometown, so Arendal is a big city here. So.
Okay, all three of you from Arendal in southern Norway, yes, excellent.
I think I can invite you, Richard, to the next podcast we could have in Arendal.
Okay, that sounds lovely, yes. In a southern Norway, idyllic surroundings in southern Norway, except Sigbjorn's based in Oslo, of course.
Yeah, well, if it's during the summer, I will be down there.
Perfect. I think that's a deal. Anyway, let's get on to Nordic spot prices. They're very high, different scale compared to the sort of last year. They're a little bit lower, about €10 lower than the German prices. But what's going on, Tor Reier?
We are working with big numbers now, looking at the different price deviations. And I think we will start with Germany. And of course, they are very good linked to the fuel prices and also the big rise in CO2 prices. So €70 in Germany is easy to explain due to this. I could come back to why I believe this German prices also is a bit too high. But if you go to the southern part of Norway, who is a very important part of the system price of the Nordic prices, I think they are €20 if you're looking at the Thursday's prices. As an example, they are at 50, Germany at 70. And you could go to the northern part of Norway, they are down to 30 and 20. So there's a huge deviation here. And most of this is important to recognize, but the level here between nuclear short-term marginal cost of €10 to €70, you see the short-term marginal cost for gas in the continental area. It's a huge area where the hydro production and the wind production has their playground. So there's a huge volume of prices here that could be placed in different levels. And that is what's happening in the northern part of Norway. There is more pressure from wind and hydro. And in the southern part, you see a very narrow price curve to connect to the continental prices at peak hours. But you also have more than 30 euros deviation between the peak hours in Germany and the southern part of Norway. So definitely there's a huge potential here to lift it further. So we are not ready with or finished with the price movements so far, I think. So there could definitely be new movements. And in the weekend of 17th of May, we saw a huge shift in many of the water values, and especially in the part around southern part of Norway. It could be some lift, could suddenly happen in days, but it could also take a month ahead before we could lift it further to the continental prices. But there's potential, definitely.
What's your view here, Sigbjorn?
Yeah, as you stated in the beginning, this year is very different from last year, and it's another good example of how this market really is, how attractive in many ways it is, and the main reason, if you should point to one factor, is obviously the weather. We had this very big hydrological surplus end of last year, and reaching mid-February, we had a deficit in the hydrological balance. So the reason why we had sort of collapsing prices last year versus high prices this year is mainly the weather, low inflow, high consumption, unfavorable wind conditions for sure. In that sense, I would say spot prices it's not difficult to explain the big difference from last year until this year. But obviously, as has been mentioned, with continental European spot prices at 70 euros, you have this price range from, say, 0, which we visited last year, up to 70. It's a huge price range, and you just have to accept that prices will change quickly and a lot in these circumstances, for sure. So I think it's you just have to be careful to get sort of a fixed view of the price development in these circumstances. But for sure, you have to develop a price expectation, and also to us, it seems that at least when we look, say, 1 year ahead, current future market price level seems a bit too low, I would say.
We'll get back onto that a bit later in the pod, I think. So I want to hear your guys' views on that. But what's happening with the hydrology? What's the outlook here, Eylert? It has been mentioned that, there was a deficit in February. What do you see happening in the weeks and months to come?
Yeah, I see just lately, when it's getting drier now, the hydrological balance is more or less normalized. So we came from a level by first part of January around maybe 20 terawatt hours surplus, which has now been reduced or normalized in the last few weeks now. And the next few weeks, we will see a rather normalized situation. And so I think really when you look on how the price differences, Nordic and the German market has developed since New Year, it's rather strange as the price difference has increased between Nord Pole and Germany, while the hydrological balance has been reduced. And you had also, during this period, has got confirmation of the effect of the Nord Pole link, which has coupled the Nordic and the continental market closer to each other. But somehow the price difference in the forward market has increased. And I think there are some reason there, but this is very strange, unexpected development, I would say.
We'll get back to that, Eylert, but I think, we've seen that Reier mentioned the split in prices, or the wide spread with prices between the north of Norway, even north of Sweden, and the southern regions. Do you expect this to continue?
Yeah, I suppose they could be a bit closer to each other later this summer. The Nordic system price, which is the tradable product, I think players just have to be aware that the water values that is not, let's say, shown in the area prices in northern Sweden and northern Norway are playing a part for the system price settlement. So I think, as I've seen lately, I think the NO2 price is what I look on as the, let's say, water value, general important water value level for the system price.
For those listeners out there who are not familiar with NO2, that would be what?
Yeah, southern part of Norway. I would say NO1, exactly. NO5, NO1, they are quite close. Coupled.
What's your view here, Tore? What do you think? You mentioned the wide spread in prices. Do you expect this to narrow then going forward?
I think this will last for a long time because if you look at the northern part of Sweden and Norway, they have seen higher hydro resources for many years. Especially NO4 have never seen high hydro reservoirs for many years. And they are not used to have this extra pressure in addition to the installation of wind. So I think the price areas in the north will be a lot more volatile due to wind. But in the southern part of Norway, we will be more stable with the core long-term hydro reservoir setting the prices. So that could be more stable. So I also see into our simulation that as long as next year, you could also see huge deviations in the north of Norway and Sweden due to the fact that we have installed a lot of wind and we also have a more volatile power balance to be more affected by the wind volatility in the market.
And of course, that makes it very difficult to hedge, doesn't it? I mean, this has been part of the issues in the Nordic market. The too many price areas.
Yeah, I could just comment to SE2 this week. We had at the same production volumes.
So where's SE2? That's southern Sweden?
No, it's in the middle of Sweden, just below the northern part of Sweden. But you saw on the same production hour, 4,000 megawatts. And in one day, we had 85 euros. And in another day, we had 5 euros at the exact same production. So is the non-controllable hydro or is it the wind who take the volumes? That is very important in the setting of the prices.
Sigbjorn, if I can turn to you here. What will happen once the UK cable comes online? I mean, are producers in Norway, are they, saving water in expectation of higher prices later this year? Do you think that's what's happening? Well, that's also causing, having a sort of bullish effect on spot prices so far this year?
Absolutely. I think that's clear. And you see it in the bidding curves for NO2 or for the entire southern Norway. So for sure, hydropower producers are sort of optimistic about the price impact of the North Sea link, which is what they should be. You should basically expect a steady flow of power out of NO2. For sure, the price location spreads have turned upside down in a very short time. And I think a key factor to study here is capacity between the Swedish price areas and also between SE3 and Finland and SE3 and eastern part of Norway. And we see that the Swedish TSO, they sort of, struggle to keep trading capacities available to the market. And the capacity from Stockholm area to the Oslo region is limited throughout the entire summer. And you could speculate what happened if that continues during autumn and into next year with the UK cable in operation, and that will be extremely positive for water values in southern Norway. So I think definitely you can see that hydropower producers in southern Norway, they really expect southern Norwegian area prices to remain above system price, well above system price for a pretty long time. So I think it compared to what we sort of have been used to over the years, things are just turned upside down now.
Mainly because of the cables, Sigbjorn.
Yeah. It's related for sure to the what seems to be a bit too fast and too much wind power build out in the northern part of Sweden. So that sort of stresses the Swedish TSO a bit, and they have to limit capacities. And that linked to the new cables, you see southern Norway now looking to be the highest price, or could be the highest price area going forward.
Absolutely. So very good news for southern Norwegian hydro producers, and maybe not so good news for northern Swedish wind developers or producers, and as well as southern or industry in southern Norway. But Reier, you wanted to interject here.
I think you have some other aspects also to this, because I think if you're looking at the spot prices in the south of Norway, southern part of Norway, they are at 50 euros. That is the highest price in the whole forward curve. You can't save water on that prices, because if you look into the forward curve, and you could see in May, we have 50 euros as a spot price. It's in the middle of the melting period, and we have come from a wet scenario. So definitely this gives me optimistic prices also for the whole forward curve. So there's something wrong with the forward curve. So you can't use the forward curve to save water in this market. So I think there is also, of course, our simulation also show that you save some water to UK cable, but the market is not allowing that. And I think there is a fair, if you lift the water values now, you will lose volumes. I don't think the hydro producers dare to do that. So that's why you are at 50, not at 60. But you could very easily lift the prices at 60 without losing volumes.
So how would they do that? Sorry, if you can explain that.
You could gain the same volume to export because the prices in the continental area is higher. It's up at 70 or high 60. And you could have the same volumes exported and same production volumes with higher prices. But the first producer to lift the prices might lose the volumes because the other neighboring producers take the volumes. So that is the fair. So you try to find a balance here to how high you can take the prices. But as long as there's no resistance, an alternative, before you go to the continental prices, it's possible to lift the water values. So there's no speed limit at 50 euros. I think they could be even higher. But again, it could take time. And it could also be a lot of other things that high wind, you have seen that very often that, for example, when you are at 70 euros, when you get wind in Germany, you suddenly fell down to zero or negative prices. And that should affect the average prices in Germany because falling from 70 euros, 2 to 3 hours could actually change the average for 1 week with €1.
Yep.
So if you get a lot of wind, definitely we have another game in the continental prices.
You may want to add something here, Eylert, but we mentioned this Nordic-German spread in the forward curve. What are your expectations going forward there, Eylert?
I think the trading at the moment, they are more or less fixed on this 30 euro difference. So the question is, how could this be reduced if it makes sense? And I think then it is the hydropower producer and the water values, as Reier is mentioning, that could lift the spot price, which in the next step could lift the forward prices. So I think that must be the way to reduce this difference. I think that's the main way to reduce this more or less obvious large difference between the Nordic and the continental market. That's how I see it. But I must also mention something about the price differences that we have been discussed now. I would also focus on what will happen in the Finnish market when the Olkiluoto 3 is coming online. This will, of course, increase price differences on that part of the Nordic market, which will influence probably Sweden 1, Sweden 2, and also Sweden 3. So this will be there will be a huge change now in the power flow when you have the UK cable and you have Olkiluoto 3. That means about 1,400 megawatts that will change direction. When we have heard how Svenska Kraftnät is struggling this year with the power flow in SA3, I wonder how it will be with Olkiluoto 3 online.
Absolutely. So added complications.
Yeah. So that's just one for the price difference, price area discussion.
It will increase the complexity of the hedging, then, I think. But, Eylert, you mentioned the UK cable there, as well as the Olkiluoto 3. Do you expect prices to rise to UK level, or will renewables growth as well as Olkiluoto dampen prices in the Nordics?
Yes, I think as I see it now, it must be Q4 when UK cable is online and Olkiluoto is not online. And then after some time during Q1, seems like Olkiluoto will be up and running, and then they will more or less equalize each other, but maybe the power flow will mean something for the net, let's say, price effect. But if you put this into just a coupled grid, then they should equalize each other. But when I look to forward prices in Q4, I think seems like the German prices are quite high for Q4. It seems like Germany has a risk premium there because of reduced hard coal capacity, maybe, from experiences that we have seen during Q1.
Absolutely. And there's also, it's having both, a combination of very high carbon prices and also capacity squeeze in terms of nuclear and coal-fired plants. But if I could turn to a slightly different subject, I think we've noticed, recently the indications for wind, the pipeline for wind in Norway specifically, is coming to a bit of a stop next year. What's your view here, Tor Reier, and what could be the consequences of this?
I think we have a lot of volumes coming into the online, even though we say that it's flattening out. So in my numbers, for 2021 and 22, we have installed 12,000 megawatts of wind in the Nordics. In the next following 3 years, we will install 4,000 to 5,000 megawatts more. But 1/3 of them will be offshore. So we are turning around from onshore to offshore as well. So of course, the more environment struggle in the onshore wind installation is of course obvious here. So we will lower down the volume. But due to this, both for next year and the year after, we will actually add 2,000 megawatts more average production to the system every hour. So both 2021, 22, 23 will add a lot of volumes. So I think we will still see this for a couple of years, the increase in wind.
Is this your view as well, Sigbjorn?
Yeah, I think that picture is absolutely clear. It will be added a lot of wind power going forward. And there are also a lot of wind power projects in the pipeline that has not made any final investment decision, but are certainly probably quite close. So even if sort of the window is closing in Norway, there will be a lot of wind power investments elsewhere going forward. And if you look at the Nordic region as a whole, it for sure the production surplus will just grow quite significantly the next few years because consumption is basically flat and wind power will grow fast. And regarding the market trading the next 5 to 10 years at 30-ish, I think that has to be, or it is related to the cost of developing new onshore wind power for sure. And as long as the market sort of knows that there are a lot of wind power projects in the pipeline, I think it will, for sure, that will limit the upside potential for futures prices in that perspective, say if you look beyond the year 2022. So if prices start to increase more, you will see more investment decisions being made. So the futures market is a different game in that sense. Spot prices for sure, they can be high, they can be low, but the general price level, I think there are significant resistance on the upside there due to this wind power potential. And also regarding the price level going forward, as this production surplus is growing so fast, so the availability of the transmission capacity, internal and external, is very important. You need to see growing export, and we see now that there are bottlenecks more or less everywhere, and bottlenecks basically is bearish for the system price. That hasn't changed, and there are uncertainties regarding Nordlink. Next year they will open for counter trade. How will that impact flows? Will we see more physical flows from Germany into NO2 because of counter trade? If that happens, it is definitely negative for water values and prices. And if the Swedish TSO continues to limit capacities, it will limit also export on the UK cable. So there are many factors to consider for sure.
It's a web of complexity, and I'm sure we want to come back to discuss with you guys when the cables are online, and also what happens with the TSOs in the region. But if I can just close today's discussion by asking you about what your demand outlook is for the next sort of 9 years. I've seen with some very bullish figures coming from the regulator, from several reports from TSOs, up to figures of 40% increase. What's your view, Eylert? Do you see this increasing by this much by 2030?
In fact, I must admit that I haven't studied all these estimates so closely, but I just recognize what I read on the Montel stories.
That's all you need, Eylert. That's all you need.
So I think we will study this closer in the months to come.
Okay, excellent. And what about you, Tor Reier? What's your view here?
I think it's big numbers, but I also see that it's a lot of uncertainties. And we see that, for example, taking one special thing of industry is the battery factories. We have a lot of battery factories in pipeline that is not in our plans for the future consumption. So they could very easily be 180 terawatt hours of consumption in Norway in that period. We have around 170, 175. So we are a bit lower. But of course, there is a lot of uncertainty, and the consumption will be a very important factor to stabilize the prices, especially in the north, because you invest in the lowest price areas very often. So low prices could also be a trigger of more investment of consumption.
What's your view, Sigbjorn, on Nordic power demand or Norwegian even?
Yeah, well, everybody's talking about all this consumption coming, and for sure, the basic idea is correct. It's a part of the green transition, but I think the question is how quickly it will come. There are infinite number of plans and very few investment decisions. And there are factors pointing down as well. They keep closing paper mills, still. And if you look at consumption here and now, it's not growing. Yeah, it's very, very easy to point to higher consumption in 10, 20 years. But in the next, say, 5 years, I think, sure, you should expect the consumption to grow. But you shouldn't sort of be too impressed by all these plans, because the fact still is that the volumes related to it is very, very small. You need to see more real investment decisions being made before you can be really bullish on the consumption, say, for the next 3 to 5 years.
So these companies need to put their money where their mouth is, as it were.
Yes.
And then we need to see the concrete plans. Absolutely. Well, guys, a fascinating discussion. Thanks very much for clarifying, explaining some of the complexities that we've seen this year and what we expect to see in the coming months and years. So thank you very much, Reier.
Thank you. And we will see next 6 months might be as much changes as we saw the past 6 months. It could be
Absolutely.
interesting.
And thank you, Sigbjorn.
Thank you.
And thank you, Eylert.
Thank you.
So listeners, you can now follow the podcast on our own Twitter account, aptly named the Montel Weekly Podcast. Please direct message any suggestions, questions, or, let us know if you think you have a good idea for a guest on the show. You can also send us an email to podcast@montelnews.com. Lastly, remember to keep up to date with all that's happening in energy markets on Montel News. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you and goodbye.